Hey there, self-care warriors. Welcome back to Self-Care Haven. Today I wanted to talk to you about a common question that I receive from survivors, which is, what if I'm the narcissist? How would I know? How would I know? How would I know if I'm the narcissist in the relationship? What if they're not the abuser? Even if they've been abusive to me, what if I'm the problem here, right? This is a common question I get from survivors because after being in such an abusive relationship like this, where you are constantly gaslighted into believing that you are the problem, you start to believe it. You start to internalize that belief and you start to think, well, maybe I'm the abuser, maybe I'm the narcissist, maybe I have been the one who has been reacting to abuse in an abusive way. Now, let's talk more about this. The first reason that I find that survivors ask, what if I'm the narcissist, is due to the effects of projection and trauma. After a traumatic event, it's very common for the victims of trauma to engage in a lot of self-blame. In a strange way, it puts the control back to them, because if they can blame themselves, they also control what happened in some way. Because you were so powerless during the abusive relationship and you felt the sense of learned helplessness, self-blame is a strange but effective method. It is a counterintuitive but nevertheless effective method of basically putting the focus and the control back to you. You're basically saying, well, if I was the problem, then I can fix this. And on some subconscious level, that actually is a little bit satisfying, because when you are able to blame yourself and attribute the chaotic nature of the relationship to yourself, you get to focus on you and you get to feel back in control in a strange way. So if you are thinking of yourself as the person who perpetrated all of this abuse or provoked it in some way, which, by the way, that's obviously not correct. I'll get to that later. That's a way for you to somehow regain control. And I know it sounds very counterintuitive, but self-blame is very common when it comes to trauma, because in a strange way, we want to regain control. We want to feel that we had some control over the events that happened, even though the events were in reality uncontrollable and we cannot control them. And they did not happen to us because of something we did or said or because of who we are. It happened because that is the nature of an abuser. An abuser is going to target you, slowly belittle and erode your reality. They will demean you. And you fell in love with a person who presented themselves very differently from who they truly are. So again, don't blame yourself, but just know that self-blame is very common after this type of abuse. Now, the second part of this that I mentioned was the effects of projection. Now, this is when the narcissistic abuser convinces you that you're the abuser in response to your accusations to them that, hey, why are you abusing me? Why are you treating me like this? They will often tell you, well, you're the abuser, you're the abusive one, you're the one who's clingy and needy and jealous, you're the one who does this and that. They might even tell you things that they themselves do, and they might hold a ridiculous double standard, right? So when you are suffering from the effects of trauma and projection and self-blame, you are going to be misled into thinking that you might be the narcissist. The second reason that we think we are the narcissist is that we attribute normal human flaws as reasons for being abused. Also related to this tendency to have that internal locus of control, the tendency to attribute outside events to ourselves, right? We translate our human flaws, our very human flaws, which everyone has, into reasons for being abused. If we sometimes get insecure, if we get jealous because of the narcissist triangulations and infidelity, which is incredibly, it's a normal response to an abnormal amount of bullshit, but we translate those human flaws and reactions into reasons for being abused. We think, oh, if I had been more secure within myself, if I hadn't reacted to the abuse the way that I would have, we start to question ourselves. We start to think that maybe I do deserve the abuse in some way. Stop right there. Just because you are a flawed human being like anyone else in this world does not give anyone the right to abuse you. The third reason that we ask if we are the narcissists is that we set up this false equivalency of our reactions to the chronic abuse as the same as being that of the abusive actions of the abuser. They translate their reactions to the abuse and equate it to the actions of their abusers. So they think, well, if I reacted maladaptively in a way that was out of character for me in response to chronic abuse, then I must be the narcissist, I must be the abuser. If you have been chronically terrorized, it is impossible not to have a human reaction. Even if you reacted in a way that you feel you shouldn't have, remember, the abuser is the one who is putting you through this torment and this toxic stress. So obviously you're going to react, and that is a false equivalency to equate your reactions to chronic abuse to that of abuse. The fourth reason that you might ask yourself, what if I'm the narcissist, is that you actually might have narcissistic fleas. Now, narcissistic fleas is very different from having a full-fledged personality disorder. If you grew up with narcissistic parents, then it's likely that you have one or more traits or characteristics that you want to improve on. Things like maybe you're overly defensive to criticism, or maybe you're extra sensitive to rejection. You know, things that because of the toxic environment you grew up in, you had these kind of residual effects. Now, these residual effects can be worked through. You can do the inner work, you can go to counseling, and you can work through these behavioral traits. If you are not, however, a disordered person, you are someone who has experienced trauma and someone who has some residual effects of that. We all have been through something. We've all had to encounter the aftermath of trauma and the effects that it has left on us. So if you're asking yourself, what if I'm the narcissist? Change the question around. Ask yourself, what am I doing to ensure that I'm taking care of myself? Because if you don't want narcissistic flee, if you don't want to constantly blame yourself, and you don't want to constantly ask yourself if you're the narcissist, find a way to detach from the abuser, find ways to go no contact or low contact, find ways to take care of yourself, find ways to do inner work and healing. And you'll realize the question is not whether I'm the narcissist or not, because if you were the narcissist, you probably wouldn't be asking yourself that question. Either you would be so self-aware that you would feel that being a narcissist is superior, or you would be so unaware of being a narcissist that you would never be able to face that kind of narcissistic injury of encountering your true self. So if you are asking yourself that question, it's very likely that you probably aren't a narcissist. And if you have been the victim of a narcissist, whether it be a narcissistic parent, a partner, a friend, remember that some of the effects of trauma can mimic some of the traits of narcissism at times, but that does not mean that you have this full-fledged personality disorder with hardwired patterns, right? Narcissists rarely change. If you have the capacity to change, if you have the capacity for empathy, if you have compassion for others, and you are able to work on yourself and you're willing to work on yourself, then you are definitely not the narcissist that you think. And it's really time to put the blame back where it belongs, to the abuser, and work on your healing. Because if there is one thing you can control, it is the fact that you can work on your own healing and your own self-care. We can't change narcissists, they would have to change for themselves, but what we can do is look within and see what are the effects of trauma. How do I work on this sense of self-blame that I'm struggling with? How do I detach myself from toxic people? We can pursue healthier relationships, but most of all, we can pursue a healthier relationship with ourselves. We can stop pointing the finger at ourselves, and we can take back our control in healthier ways, in ways that do not involve blaming ourselves for the abusive actions of other people. I hope this video helps to clarify why survivors would ask that question and why it's very likely that the answer to the question is no, you're not the narcissist, you are the survivor of narcissistic abuse. If you have more reasons to add in the comment section below, I know I didn't really touch on it in this video, but there's also a lot of spiritual frameworks that encourage victim blaming. So if you want to discuss that in the comment section below, feel free to leave a comment letting us know what are the reasons that you think you asked yourself that question, and what are the ways that you can redirect that question so that you can have a healthier perception of what it means to be a survivor. I hope this video has helped you and has helped release some of that victim blaming and victim shaming that you may have experienced, not just from yourself, but from society. I'll talk to you guys very soon, and until next time, take care. Be sure to check out my #1 best-selling book on personality disorders, Becoming the Narcissist Nightmare: How to Devalue and Discard the Narcissist While Supplying Yourself, a #1 bestseller in personality disorders.